Hi everyone, welcome back to the competition studio of the 2025 International Paderewski Piano Competition in Bydgoszcz. This morning I'm joined by a very, very special guest, Dr. Veda Kaplinsky, head of piano at the Juilliard School. Welcome, Veda.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being here. We talked in the last competition in the, I believe it was semi-final round, about the education of young pianists and what leads them to competitions like this. And for today, we're talking in the final round, and we're about to hear the big piano concertos. So I wanted to pick your brain a bit about piano concertos in general, about teaching them and style and pianistic things. From the vantage point of a juror who judges a lot, the first few stages are solo, and then pianists have to play concerti. What do concerti reveal to you that solo recitals don't?
They reveal a lot, but mostly the ability to listen, not just to yourself, but to a group of others. And there are pianists who sit next to 100 people on stage and think they're the only ones there. But and then there are ones that are constantly sensitive to what's going on around them. The ability to follow a conductor, the ability to judge balance. How loud, because you have to adjust basically from being able to practice a certain level of sound and then hearing yourself on stage, which is a very different experience. So there's a lot going on there that does not reveal itself as much in solo playing.
When it comes to preparing students for competitions where there are really big piano concerti, usually in conservatories we practice with two pianos, right? What are the differences between doing two piano rehearsal and then working with an orchestra?
Well, the image I can give you about the difference is it's like practicing driving on a race car and then going for your driving test on a truck. Because you get used to extreme pliability and ability to adjust, which is what comes from the other piano. He's one person, he's sitting right next to you, he probably knows the score, he hears everything that you're doing, and all of a sudden you're in front of 100 guys, and the response time is very different. They forget that if a conductor has to follow you, and then 100 guys are supposed to, or women, are supposed to follow the conductor. And sometimes the conductor is not very clear, is not very much on time. So there is a lag. There is a, it's like the internet. There's a lag between what you see and what you hear. If they're not able to adjust to that, then it ends up being rather chaotic. And it's also very important for everybody who studies the score to know exactly what the orchestra is doing. Sometimes, pianists learn scores and they ignore rests because they figure the rests are not important. The orchestra is playing. And then I have this experience all the time where they learn a concerto and then I play with them and they constantly interrupt me because they're not aware of how long they have to wait.
Right.
So that, I give them the image of being an actor and learning a part in a play and learning only what you have to say, not what anybody else is saying. It doesn't make sense, and you can't make sense out of it unless you understand the responsiveness between the piano and the orchestra. And it's also important to know which instruments are doing what, because if the strings are playing with you, it's much less problematic. But if you have a clarinet player or a horn player sitting in the back who doesn't hear you, they don't realize how the brass in the back do not hear the piano. So they're relying completely on cues from the conductor. And brass notoriously are late, because it takes them time to breathe and to make the sound. So if you don't adjust for that and you don't listen, it's not going to be together.
One of the things I'm hearing that's very important in the study process is to learn the orchestral score, not just the second piano score.
That's absolutely correct.
And
a lot of conductors who come to Juilliard to conduct the orchestra actually test the students who win competitions and play to see how much they know the score. And,
Right.
very often they become very embarrassed by the questions.
Yeah, one of the things I can remember you telling me in the lesson once was get used to looking up into your left. Can you explain that piece of advice?
Absolutely, because the conductor is always to your left. And if you get used to looking every time there's a tricky part at the piano and you cannot lift your eyes from it, you're not going to have the kind of eye contact that is absolutely necessary, especially when there are tempo changes or where there are entrances that are tricky. One thing that pianists need to know, especially those playing the Beethoven concerti, because in Beethoven and in Mozart, it's more important and more noticeable than in other composers, is that if you have a run, that goes to the top, and then there's a note at the top of the run that is with the orchestra. If you play that note as an extension of the run, you're going to be early. But if you place it, if you go ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, bum, if you just place it by a split second, you will be with the orchestra. And that's true even of second pianos, but it's more noticeable when there's a whole orchestra coming in.
And because another thing I remember from that same lesson, I think it was on Brahms D minor, you gave me this image. It was so lucid, and it was conductors don't like curveballs.
That's right. I hear it from them all the time.
One of the things I'm curious...
Many of them, by the way, are very big baseball fans, so
really?
They know about curveballs.
What is the impulse that drives young pianists today to play so fast and potentially throw those curveballs? What do you think is happening?
Well, a lot of it is competition. I hate to say it, but somehow young people feel that unless they play it as fast as it can be played, or anybody like Marta Argerich plays it, then they're not going to be competitive. And it's so not true. It's a notion that has to be dispelled by teachers who prepare them, because it's just not true. And in fact, it's very annoying when somebody plays faster than the ear can hear. And I keep telling them that composers, especially 18th, 19th century composers who had to write everything by hand, and in the case of Mozart, not even with a pen, with a feather.
Quill and ink,
they have to constantly dip the feather, and it's tedious to write notes. So if they write them, they want to be heard. They don't write notes in order to be covered up.
The first time, it was in Aspen once when we were doing the concerto competition, it was Rock Peg. You said something that completely changed my perception of speed and tempo. In concertos, anything you're working with an orchestra, strong rhythm is always more interesting to everyone than speed.
Absolutely, because strong rhythm indicates control and power. And speed just indicates that you're getting pulled by the neck by some kind of force that takes you past the music. And it's very true. And even the perception of speed is different in different situations. I always give my students the image of a mountain bike where you can go on for 10, 15 miles an hour and you feel like you're going really fast. And then you go on an airplane at 600 miles an hour and you don't feel like you're moving because there's no traction and there's no friction. There's no contact with anything. It's just air. And that does not create a sensation of speed. So the more clarity you have between the notes, the more you hear the attacks of every note, the faster it's going to sound.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because the same, I feel, sense of resistance applies to the experience of actually being at the keyboard and feeling like your perception of your sound is so different than when you play solo, because you're interacting very much like a chamber musician. And I was hoping you would unpack this because your imagery is always so vivid. I was giving a performance of Rock 2, and backstage somebody asked me, so how did the pianist play tonight? And I said, okay, that was me on stage, and that's probably a really bad sign, but the truth is we feel our sound so differently when we're surrounded by the orchestra. Why is that?
Well, because when we're by ourselves, there's nothing interacting with us, and when we're with an orchestra, there's a volume of sound that nobody really is prepared for until you hear it. There are so many people playing. It's not even like chamber music where you have one violin and one cello. You have 16 violins. You have everything is multiplied, and pianists who usually play by themselves and practice by themselves are overwhelmed by that sound. And so it requires an adjustment. And in the case of playing with orchestras, nothing really matters like experience, like doing it. And I would advise everybody who has to play a concerto to look for opportunities, even with some community orchestras, to run through things, because it's overwhelming the first time you hear it. It really is overwhelming, and it's like being a surgeon. You can learn how to cut somebody up on just a dummy, and then you go to a live person, and the adrenaline is enormous because the stakes are different. So experience.
I have a very close friend who's in medical school, and she told me the first day of scrubbing in for a surgery was like nothing she'd ever experienced, even before she got into the operating room. On this same vein, and we're going to hear the Brahms one a couple of times tomorrow. I was playing that once with a community orchestra, and a couple of people on one of the rehearsal breaks complained to me, they hadn't seen me yet, that this is such a huge concerto and it's really difficult, and they weren't exactly happy that the conductor had chosen Brahms one. But the experience of running it through was so valuable, because then when I played it with a professional orchestra a couple seasons later, I had already had the experience of a few days with this piece. When you say it's recommended for students to gain experience, what are some of the valuable takeaways from working with a community orchestra, even if they're playing such heavy repertoires, Prokofiev, Brahms, Rachmaninoff, Beethoven, Concerti?
Just the sheer sound, just getting used to the sheer sound, and also getting used to response time, where you know that, first of all, you have to be very clear with your signals, because if you're not clear, a conductor is not going to be able to follow you. There are very few conductors that can follow bad pianists, There are some that no matter what you throw at them, they will get it. But by the time you get to play with those guys, you have to go through a lot of ones that are not that experienced or capable. So, be kind to the conductor. Give them signals. Telegraph what your intentions are. Don't just play fast and then stop and expect them to find you on the downbeat. Always telegraph it by the, if you, one of my students told me that he wants to enter a conducting course this summer, and I really applauded him, because I feel that every pianist should learn how to conduct, just to appreciate what they have to go through and what they have to do. And if you telegraph your intentions the way a conductor does, in other words, the upbeat of the conductor is what's going to determine the downbeat, not the downbeat.
Right.
By the time you go down, it's too late.
Yeah.
It's the up that will bring down the down. So if you're playing and you want an orchestra to be with you, you have to make sure that your upbeats telegraph the downbeat. If your upbeat are in one tempo and then you expect the downbeat to be at a different tempo, it's not going to happen.
There's something so sage about these remarks, because they're so practical and useful on a stage. We pianists study alone, and you said your student is going to a conducting academy, and that's great. Where did you gather all these pearls of wisdom about conductors, about orchestras?
Do you know how old I am? Experience. I mean, if you think I knew all of this when I was 20, I didn't. But, you gather experience from doing it yourself, from watching students. I learned so much from going to young students' performances with orchestras and sitting through the rehearsals, because I see what works and what doesn't work. And I'm always so happy for them that they have the experience of doing it so that they can learn. And it's really important also for students to know that when they enter competitions, they may have the misfortune of winning, and then things happen. I meant to say that because sometimes winning is a misfortune because you're not ready for what comes next, and then those are missed opportunities. So if you're going to play with a major orchestra, you better know what you're doing.
No, I realized that it wasn't a misnomer what you were saying because it sounds just like the kind of advice that you tend to give. The next question I have for you regards the differences in styles. All the Paderewski competitors who've made it to the finals have just finished in the semifinal a Mozart concerto with a chamber orchestra. And now they're going to be playing Beethoven 3 and 5, Liszt number 1, and we'll hear 2 Brahms first concerti.
Great choices.
Yeah, but what are your impressions of, let's start from a very basic thing, the difference between a chamber concerto, like a Mozart concerto, and then a grander, longer concerto, romantic, standard repertoire?
Well, everybody thinks that the Mozart is simpler because there are less tempo changes, there are no funny meters, it's sort of predictable, but there's a certain transparency in Mozart that requires a very different kind of technique and different kind of listening than the massivity of the sound of a Liszt or a Brahms. And you have to be aware of what are the important elements of the style. If you play Mozart with a modern orchestra, even a chamber orchestra, you have to be prepared for the fact that you can't use as much soft pedal as you may think that Mozart liked. And he didn't, by the way, but he didn't even have the soft pedal, but he did not like soft playing. He did not like surfacey playing. He liked meaty sounds. And if you want to know what kind of sounds Mozart liked, listen to the operas. Right. But if you're playing it with a modern orchestra, you're going to get lost if you play very surfacey and very, very light. Because the winds produce much more sound today than they used to 200 years ago, and you have to adjust for that. So the ability to hear important things like pulse. If you have a run, you have to be able to discern where the beat is. Yes. You can't just glide. It's not a glissando. You have to create shapes with the shape of the passage. The passage is turning around. There's a dynamic shape to it. And you have to be very cognizant of those things. When it comes to Brahms, it's different. The phrasing is different. The concept of sound is different. And of course, the orchestra is huge. But the difference between Mozart and Beethoven is also striking. So those who played Mozart concerti are now playing Beethoven 3 and 5 are basically going to a completely different style and a very different sense of what rhythm was. There is power in both these concerti. They're both dramatic. One is almost tragically dramatic, at least in the first movement, and one is just very triumphantly dramatic. But both of them have drama which is produced by rhythm. And unless you can really feel that power of the rhythm, I'm always reminded when I play and teach Beethoven of the question that Leon Fleischer used to ask in just about every master class. What makes rhythmic playing? What is the meaning of rhythmic playing? And his answer was, play as late as possible without being late. And to me, that's a classic. And it's, it sounds a little crazy on the surface, but when you think about it, it's exactly what it is. Because
the
there's
first time you said
always
that to me in a
side of the
Schubert
beat.
piece, I got chills just thinking about what that would mean.
Yeah, it's when you think about every beat, if you liken it to a metronome, the old metronomes, which I thought were much more musical than the electronic ones, because you could see what happens between the beats. There's a visual thing that happens. It's not just this and then this. Something happens in between, and that happens differently in different tempi. But there's a difference between the time this beat is over and the next beat starts. And that's that gray area where you can play here or you can play here. So if you play on the late side in Beethoven, you're always more powerful rhythmically than if you play on the early side.
I mean, Beethoven in general, when the rhythm is distorted, the whole clarity of the phrase and the experience of the form is distorted.
Yeah, well, we don't talk about distortions in Beethoven. We talk about accentuations of rhythm.
Right.
The rhythm has its own character, and you accentuate that character. You do not distort it.
We were talking last week with Joanna McGregor from London, and she was saying that we were talking about sonatas, and she said there are many different things you can do in certain sonatas, but a Beethoven score is a legal document.
She's absolutely right. And those legal documents have a lot of depth to them. I mean, this is, we're talking about the emperor, so I'll give you an example. The biggest problem with the Beethoven concerti is that talented kids can learn them very quickly.
Right.
And they assume that if they can play them up to tempo and they know all the notes from memory, they're ready to perform them. And they don't realize that, wait, you have to live with those things for years before you can really make a statement with them. So, I got an email from a young student, a high school student, saying that, there's a competition for the emperor next couple of weeks in school. I learned it in a week. I'd like to enter the competition. And I don't even know how to answer that. And this is a smart kid. So, if you think that you can play a Beethoven concerto just because you learned the notes and you didn't live with the concepts and the depth and all the details, because in Beethoven, tiny little details make all the difference in the world. And there's no way you can learn all those details in a week, no matter how great you are.
Because you have to ingrain those things as physical, technical habits in your body so that any piano you play on, you can get certain voicings, certain timings of sound.
Yeah, the timing is critical because you don't have a lot of leeway, but you also have to express things in certain ways that require tiny little nuances of rhythm, and those are very hard to get.
They are.
They're hard to internalize. They're hard to measure because you always do too much, and then you start, getting closer and closer. It takes time until you really hit the right amount.
I'm curious just to ask this. When was what was the first concerto you ever taught to a student, and what was that like?
The first I ever taught?
Yeah.
It was Beethoven 1 it was when I first started teaching, and she's now on the faculty of piano literature in both Peabody and Juilliard, but I met her when she was my next door neighbor when she was 10.
Wow.
And she was incredibly brilliant, and she fooled me because I had no experience at that time, and she would bring in a Beethoven sonata a week memorized, and I thought she practiced a lot, and she didn't, because how do you do that without practicing? But I found out that it is possible for some people. But so she was working on Beethoven 1, and that was my first concerto.
And what about you as a player? What concerti did you play, and what concerti do you love?
Well, I had a very strict Hungarian teacher who read me the riot act about only playing things that she assigned. So I was a very obedient little kid, and I was scared of touching a score that I wasn't assigned to play. And she was incredibly cautious, I should say, in terms of what what she assigned to students because she felt that everybody had to have the emotional maturity to play what they were playing. So I did not get to play Chopin until I was 12. And the first concerto I learned, of course, was Bach D minor. And then I graduated to Haydn D major. And then I graduated to some of the Mozart concerti. And I didn't really touch the big ones until I was a student at Juilliard.
And which ones did you love playing? What are your favorite concerti?
Well, this question is one that's asked of me all the time. And I would be a very boring person if the answer was always the same. My answer is whichever one I'm working on, because if I worked on a concerto, I would be so immersed in it that became my favorite, or I made it my favorite, so that I felt like I was worthy of playing it. And so it varies. Same for composers.
It's a wonderful answer. And to that end, you've dropped the hint about Hungarian first teacher. We're going to hear Liszt first concerto in the final, and Liszt is so often accused of being a really shallow, showy composer. Tell us your thoughts on the Liszt Concerto No. 1.
Okay, I was also a musical snob when I was very young, and I thought that, Liszt was cheap. And I am so wrong. Liszt's harmonic language, if you really look at it, is so amazing. And the E-flat concerto is a great example of that. It reminds me a little bit of the E-flat 31-3 sonata by Beethoven. Where the whole first movement is basically a quiz of what key am I? The Liszt E-flat concerto, if you look at the harmonic progression of the movement, it's incredibly brilliant because it's constantly running away from 5-1, which is how you hear definitively that something is in a key. I mean, the Liszt E-flat starts on E-flat, but you don't hear an E-flat chord. And you don't hear the dominant until it's disguised in such a way and is, instead of being resolved to E-flat, goes from B-flat to B to C major. And the first tonality that you really hear is C major in that. And this goes on throughout the whole movement. He constantly fools you. Every time you think, oh, this is it. No, it's not. And then at the very end, you hear E-flat, B-flat, E-flat, B-flat in the bass, the end of the first movement. But the orchestra is in E-flat and the piano is in D sharp. So it's, that kind of incongruity is so revolutionary. And people look at this E-flat concerto and they say, oh, I just hope I don't miss the octaves at the beginning. And that's not the point of the piece. And in fact, was virtuosity important to him? Yes, it was. He was a showman, there's no doubt. But he was a showman with a very conflicted and very tormented soul. And all his life was just conflict. And his music reflects that. So in that respect, it's very human, it's very relatable, but it's also incredibly ingenious. I don't think that we would have Wagner without Liszt, because Wagner took over from where Liszt left off. I don't think we would have Liszt without Chopin, but that's, there is an evolution there. But the Liszt concerto, the E-flat concerto, I think is one of the cleverest pieces that Liszt wrote. And if you look at just the harmonic makeup of the first movement, you realize how ingenious it is. But the biggest pitfall in the Liszt E-flat is the tempo.
Right.
Because starting from the scherzo, which by the way has the triangle, which cannot really enunciate ta-tam, ta-tam if you play too fast. But, very often you just hear one note there because you can't hear two at the tempo that they start. But basically, the structure of the third and fourth movement is a constant accelerando to the end. And you see, it doesn't go like this, but it goes like this until at the end is the fastest. And some people start the scherzo so fast that that kind of trajectory is impossible to create. So I think that when you play the Liszt E-flat, you need to start from the end and ask yourself, how fast can I play that? And then work your way back to the beginning of the scherzo.
This kind of tempo planning is so important in concerti because, as you were mentioning, you're driving this huge force behind you, and you've got to make this combination of soloists and the orchestra work somehow. I was thinking, as you were talking about the tempo of the end of the Liszt E-flat, do you feel the same applies to the Brahms D minor, the third movement, which gets faster and faster, and yet it starts relatively fast?
Yeah, but that's keeps going back to the theme, which is the same tempo. The yum pam yum, that's always the same tempo until the very end, where it appears actually much slower.
Yes.
So it's a completely different structure, but the tempo relationships are very important always. I always tell students that, in some pieces, not in all pieces, but in many pieces, there is a leeway of tempo. You can play it slower, you can play it faster. That certainly is true of Rock 3. But the tempo relationships cannot be changed. Because if the relationships are reversed, because you start too fast and then you have to slow down when it gets faster, then you're tampering with the overall structure of the piece. So, you can decorate any way you want, but you cannot change the structure of a building.
That's a really good, you always have this way with imagery. Let's talk quickly about the Brahms D minor. What are some of the pianistic risks? What are its challenges? What are the things that tend to put people off?
I think one has to realize the scope of this piece before you even play it. The piece needs a lot of breathing space. It's like a Tolstoy novel. You cannot create a short story out of it. It has to have space. When you read a big novel, you need space between the beginning and the end. You cannot jump in a few hours from the beginning to the end. You need the space of time as you're reading it. You need a space of time as you're listening to it. And that space has to be constructed very carefully. And to me, the easiest way to figure it out is the resistance of the notes. Like the lack of resistance between tom pa pa da pa da pa da pa da pa and the amazing resistance of da 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 da. Sorry, I can't sing, but
no, the second theme, I know exactly what I'm remembering a lesson with you on this. It was the first thing you said to me.
Every note is like pulling a rope, it's not just dum 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 dum. It's da, da, da. You have to feel that space between the notes. There's so many pitfalls in that piece.
Tell us a bit about Brahms' sound. What makes it special?
Brahms' sound is very is the one that is the least like a piano. I think we as pianists always strive to make the instrument sound like something else. I always say to students, nobody comes out of a concert saying, "Oh, he was so good, he made the piano just like a piano." No, it's made the piano sound like a baritone, he made the piano sound like a cello. It's always another instrument that the piano is compared to. And that's when the success stories are made, when the piano sounds like something other than a piano. And in Brahms's case, it's an orchestra. You have horns, you have violins, you have cellos, you have all the instruments of the orchestra in your piano part. And the trick is to have a sound imagery. Of course, we can't get into that in depth right now, but The sound imagery that you have in your brain has to be very orchestral. Otherwise, you just don't measure up. You know, because the orchestra sounds like an amazing orchestra. I mean, if orchestras love to play Brahms concerti because the 2D parts are like a Brahms symphony, and they love it because the orchestra is so rich and so active. It has such an active role. They don't like to play Chopin concertos, but they love to play Brahms
45
concertos.
notes and then land on one chord together.
Exactly. So the Brahms concerti are a tour de force for the orchestra, and then the piano should sound like it matches them, like it has that coloristic effect and depth of sound and range of sound that the orchestra does, and that's a challenge.
Definitely. I think it's hard to do that in Brahms, especially with the louder stuff, without forcing the piano to belt or to
Right. Then you have to develop sound that, you know, to me, one of the biggest problems of pushing young people to play too quickly, to perform too quickly, to win competitions too quickly, is that sound is like human growth. You know, you cannot have an adult sound when you were a kid, no matter how good your sound is. It grows with time. It grows with your ear adjusting, with your arms being able to create different motions. It grows with time, and you need to give it time. This is why I would never assign a Brahms concerto to a young kid, because I feel that they just, you know, they will pay lip service to the piece, but they won't really perform it.
The thing that comes to mind when you say this is the second movement. This is so profoundly gorgeous, and the depth of sound needed is something coming from experience. In fact, I remember you saying, practice Beethoven 4, the first bar, with different voicings and different depths of just that one chord, and then bring that same type of voicing into the second movement. This really, there's something so special about voicing a Brahms-style chorale for the piano. How often in your traveling and listening to competitors all over the world do you hear these grand concerti really perfectly voiced in the slow playing?
Very rarely. And the truth is that we don't hear too much. It's very recent that Brahms concerti went into the mainstream of competition finals. Because I think people are getting tired of Rock 3 and Prokofiev 2. But for a while, everybody fell back on the safety net of a Prokofiev concerto or the safety net of a Rachmaninoff concerto, because you can miss a lot of things, not miss notes, but even miss notes, but miss a lot of points in these concerti, and they still have the effect of the aesthetic effect of something very powerful and very successful with audiences, especially. Brahms is not like that. Brahms requires, Brahms requires so much emotional depth, not just cosmetic depth, but emotional depth. It requires so much power that comes from within, not from without. And if you don't have that sense of power, that need to express what he has to say, then you're not going to do it. And it's just going to be a nice piece. You can't kill that piece if you play it, you know. It's just so beautiful and so well constructed that it's always going to sound like a good piece. But then again, you know, there are pieces that will always sound good, and you will sound like either a good or a bad pianist. But then there are pieces, if they're played badly, they sound like a bad composer. And I think this was Liszt's problem for many, many years. It was played so badly that people thought it was a bad piece. But the truth is that most Liszt pieces, if you play them well, they become really good pieces.
I agree with you. You've just hinted at my last question, but I'll ask it anyway just to give you a chance at it from running with the whole question in view. Have you ever heard competition performances of these grand concerti that really gave you shivers down your spine and you thought, now that's a phenomenal artist?
The truth is that the pieces in competitions where I felt somebody was a phenomenal artist were not Brahms. I mean, I've never heard Brahms in a competition that sounded phenomenal to me. Sounded good, but not phenomenal. But
How curious.
yeah, but I heard, because those people, by chance, I mean, obviously I don't judge every competition, but ironically, the few times where I heard people like Trifonov, who I knew, this is it. I said to myself after the first round that the competition is now for second place, because there was no doubt that he was head and shoulders above everybody else. Sometimes that happens. It doesn't happen every time. Sometimes it's very difficult because nobody really stands out that much.
Yeah.
But he didn't play Brahms. But I've heard Beethoven. I've heard Chopin. I've heard Rachmaninoff.
Yeah.
Some stunning Rachmaninoff, but not Brahms.
But in general, you have
The
heard.
Brahms performances that stick in my mind were of much older people. One, the D minor that sticks in my mind is from decades ago, when Barenboim played it with the New York Phil, and that was like the ultimate in power that comes out of the orchestra. And the B flat that sticks in my mind is Efim Bronfman, who is able to make the piano sound like an orchestra more than anybody else I know.
I'm struck when he plays it. He barely moves, but the sound comes out is incredible.
Right, exactly.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Well, no, because he uses his arms correctly.
Yeah.
He does it. He uses it judiciously. It doesn't pound.
Actually, now I have to ask this question, even though I promised you the last one would be the last. What do you think about the current trend in pianists and the gymnastic effect? Now we're talking about Bronfman and how he just sits and uses his arms well, and these huge sounds come out. Do you find it's more in vogue now to be hyper-expressive through physical gesture?
This comes and goes. It used to be, and then it went away because people complained about it, and now it's coming back again. The truth is that you can tell, if you're a good judge, you can tell instantly whether this is organic, with all these motions are organic and are felt, not orchestrated and put on, or whether they're meant in order to educate the public by saying, this is really beautiful, and this is really funny, and this is really sad. I mean, when people do that, I get an allergic reaction. It's, I want to be able to close my eyes and hear everything that the composer intended. I don't want to have to look at you to do that.
You told me that once in the Liszt Sonata. You said, don't educate me. Just play the slow theme.
Yeah, well, Andras Schiff says that all the time. Don't educate.
I'm so glad to hear you say these things. They're really, really helpful and illuminating because, audiences watch these things and they react to certain elements in a concerto because it's so exciting. But you have a level of expertise on this and a lot of experience that allows you to see and hear really specific details. And I think this interview will be very, very fascinating for the people who are watching because you're giving us a window into what you hear and what you see when someone plays a big concerto. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today, Veda. It's been wonderful to talk to you. Great to see you. And
thank you. Yeah. And give my regards to members of the jury that I know because I have very fond memories of my one visit there.
Yes, you were here.
Which was very close to my hometown, actually, my parents' hometown. I was born in Israel, but my parents come from Belarus, which is about a couple of hours away from Bydgoszcz. So, yeah.
It's been wonderful to have you. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's competition studio, and enjoy the finals. We'll see you tomorrow again. Take care. Thanks, Veda.
Bye.
The 13th International Paderewski Piano Competition in Bydgoszcz, Poland. November 9th to 23rd. Watch live broadcasts online. More information at paderewskicompetition.pl and on social media.
Bydgoszcz. Jedno miasto, dwie rzeki, tysiące historii.
Energia jutra zaczyna się w umysłach, które sięgają dalej. Energia jutra to bezpieczeństwo, rozwój, niezależność. Wielkie inwestycje dla pewnej przyszłości. Orlen to więcej niż przystanek na drodze. To droga. Energia jutra zaczyna się dziś.
Stadiony, baseny, muzea, opery, te i wiele innych obiektów powstało ze środków przekazanych przez Totalizator Sportowy. Od 1994 roku przekazaliśmy na te cele ponad 22 miliardy złotych. Totalizator Sportowy, właściciel marki Lotto.
The 13th International Paderewski Piano Competition in Bydgoszcz, Poland. November 9th to 23rd. Watch live broadcasts online. More information at paderewskicompetition.pl and on social media.
Cukiernia Sowa życzy Wam słodkiego dnia. Codziennie.
Międzynarodowy Konkurs Pianistyczny imienia Ignacego Jana Paderewskiego w Bydgoszczy.